He thought breaking your heart was the end of the story, that you'd crumble, chase, cry, and maybe even beg. What he didn't expect was silence, growth, a version of you so evolved, so unshakably grounded, that it made him question the very choice he thought was power. This isn't about petty revenge. This is about reclaiming what he tried to dim in you, your confidence, your radiance, your peace. Because when a woman rises from heartbreak with grace and unbothered elegance, it doesn't just bruise his ego. It shatters the illusion that he had any power at all. If he broke your heart, don't try to fix his. Instead, become the woman he'll never have access to again. Not because you hate him, but because you finally remembered who you are. When you stop explaining yourself to him, something powerful happens. You reclaim your energy. Because here's the truth. A man who breaks your heart and still expects access to your mind, your emotions, or your attention is someone who was never interested in understanding you to begin with. He was interested in control, in the validation that comes from knowing you're still emotionally tangled in him. Every explanation you give about why you walked away, about how much he hurt you, about what you hoped it would be, is a breadcrumb that tells him he still holds space in your thoughts. And when he knows that, he doesn't feel regret. He feels power. But when you stop talking, when you stop justifying your silence, your glow up, your boundaries, he begins to unravel. Why? Because silence creates space for self-reflection. And men aren't used to that kind of accountability when they're still clinging to the idea that they could have you back whenever they want. But when you shift from defense to detachment, from reaction to indifference, that's when his ego takes a real hit. Because now, you're not trying to fix it, you're not trying to prove your worth anymore, you're not even mad. And that quiet composure, that emotional stillness, it screams louder than any confrontation ever could. There's a kind of strength in no longer trying to be understood by someone who had every chance to understand you and chose not to. You realize that the version of you who kept explaining was just trying to win clarity in a place built on confusion. But the woman you are now, she's no longer playing the game. She's already outgrown the conversation. That stings for him, because people like him don't change when you cry or argue. They change when your absence starts to speak in volumes. You have to remember, the moment you stop seeking closure from someone who never gave you peace is the moment you start giving yourself freedom. Not explaining yourself doesn't make you cold, it makes you self-respecting. It draws a line in the sand. This is where you lose access to my mind. And that line, that's what wounds the ego more than anything else. Because now he doesn't get to define the narrative. He doesn't get to be the one who decides when the story ends. You do. And you chose silence. He might reach out. He might fish for a reaction. He might even pretend to want answers himself. But don't be fooled. He's not looking for resolution. He's looking for reassurance. That you're still emotionally tethered to him, that he still has influence, that some part of you is still hoping for a shift in his behavior. But that old version of you, the one who waited, overthought, or rationalized every red flag, she's gone. She left the moment you decided to stop shrinking for someone who couldn't see your value. So when you stop explaining, you don't just take your power back, you hold a mirror up to his actions, a mirror he can't escape. And in that mirror, he won't see the villain you refuse to paint him as. He'll see his own reflection for what it is, careless, impulsive, and undeserving of the heart he broke. That's what breaks his ego, not your anger, not your tears, but the realization that he's now irrelevant to the woman he once thought he could string along forever. And the best part? You didn't need to say a word. When you become emotionally unbothered, you stop reacting to the games. That's when everything shifts. He might have once fed off your highs and lows, your tears, your overthinking, your late-night texts filled with confusion or longing. He liked the power that came from watching you chase clarity while he stayed comfortably vague. But the moment you become emotionally neutral, the chase ends, and that rattles him in a way no dramatic speech ever could. Because the drama was never what bothered him. It was your detachment that he never expected. Being emotionally unbothered doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care more about your peace than his approval. It means that instead of trying to read between the lines of his mixed signals, you focus on the only message that truly matters, how he shows up or doesn't. You stop accepting emotional breadcrumbs. You stop giving energy to potential. You start choosing consistency, effort, and respect, or nothing at all. That mindset is magnetic, not because it's a strategy, but because it's a declaration. I am the prize. I don't audition for roles in anyone's life. A man knows when he can't shake you anymore. He knows when the button pushing stops working, when you no longer spiral after he ghosts, when you don't flinch at the cold messages, when you don't chase the bare minimum. He feels it. And that's when the power dynamic flips, because now he's the one wondering where he stands. Now he's the one trying to get a read on your silence. He might try to provoke a reaction. He might test the waters, but you, grounded and unshaken, don't bite. You've upgraded to a space where your emotions serve you, not sabotage you. You're not playing cold to seem strong. You are strong, because being emotionally unbothered isn't about faking detachment. It's about healing so deeply that you don't need to perform. You're not waiting for validation. You're not clinging to potential. You're not giving energy to someone who's indecisive about you. You're too focused on your own evolution to revolve around someone who can't give you clarity, and he feels that. In the past, he might have seen your emotions as something to manipulate, but now your silence is confusing. It's not silence that says, I'm trying to make you miss me. It's silence that says, you no longer have access. That's the kind of peace he didn't expect, because he thought he could come and go. He thought he could send a hey and pull you back in. He thought you'd always be available, always decoding, always waiting. But you rewrote the rules. You no longer base your worth on how much someone chooses you. You don't stay emotionally tied to someone who doesn't show up consistently. And that shift, that's what stays with him. That's what gets under his skin. Because he didn't lose someone needy. He lost someone healed, someone secure, someone who no longer needs chaos to feel love. And the hardest part for him to swallow, it's not that you left, it's that you're not hurting the way he imagined. He expected your sadness to center around him, but it doesn't. You might have cried, you might have broken, but you rebuilt without him. And you did it without theatrics, without dragging him back in, without seeking closure. That kind of emotional self-respect isn't just powerful, it's unforgettable. And when a woman becomes unforgettable for her strength, her peace, and her ability to walk away without bitterness, that's the moment she becomes the one he never truly gets over. When you stop defending yourself and let your silence speak, you take back control in the most elegant and unexpected way. It's tempting when you're hurt or misunderstood to want to clarify, to argue your side, to prove that you were right and he was wrong. But when you reach a certain level of self-respect, you realize that not every attack deserves a response, not every misunderstanding needs correcting, and not every man who broke you deserves access to your voice again. Silence, in the right hands, becomes a louder message than any text, call, or carefully crafted speech. Because silence says, I don't need to fight to prove my worth. It says, I don't have to explain why I walked away. It says, I'm no longer in the business of convincing someone to value me. And that drives him insane, because he expected you to react. He expected drama. He expected the familiar pattern where he pulls away and you chase emotionally, mentally, even energetically. And so, but this time, you didn't. You let the space between you do the talking. You let the echo of his choices bounce off your silence. He may tell himself that you were cold, that you shut down, but deep down, he knows what your silence really means. It means you saw enough. It means you finally understood that the more you argued for your place in someone's life, the more they took your presence for granted. It means you learned that no amount of defending yourself will change someone who refuses to truly see you. So, you stopped trying, not because you gave up, but because you grew up. And that kind of growth is intimidating. He may test your silence, he may throw bait, send you a message, post something he knows you'll see, try to provoke a reaction. Because as long as you're reacting, he knows he still holds a piece of you. But when you stay grounded, calm, and clear within yourself, his tactics fall flat. He starts realizing he's shouting into an emotional void. And that's when it starts to hit him. You're not angry anymore. You're not chasing anymore. You're not even explaining anymore. And that's what makes him feel your absence the most. There's a different kind of strength in not needing to prove anything, especially when you know you were genuine. You showed up, you cared, you tried, you gave him the best of you. And if that wasn't enough to wake him up, then no carefully worded explanation will. He'll realize too late that you left not with a storm, but with a calm that unnerved him. A quiet departure, but a loud impact. Because silence doesn't just mean walking away, it means reclaiming your peace. It means trusting that someone who truly valued you wouldn't have put you in a position to question your worth. And by staying silent, you're not saying you're over it. You're saying you're over-justifying yourself to someone who never took the time to understand you in the first place. That's the real closure, not a final talk, not a dramatic ending, but the moment you stop participating in the cycle. Eventually, he'll scroll through the messages you never replied to. He'll remember the way you used to show up. He'll feel the shift, and that silence, that unwavering, unshakable stillness, you didn't need to scream or beg or plead. You just needed to go quiet. Because in the end, the most powerful statement you can make isn't one you speak, it's the one you embody. And when your peace becomes louder than your pain, that's when he finally hears you. When you show him you're not replaceable, it's not about arrogance or trying to prove your worth with grand gestures. It's about living in a way that radiates such authentic value, peace, and self-assurance that he knows deep down he lost something he'll never find again. Because truthfully, people don't fear losing someone they can easily replicate. They fear losing someone who brought a unique presence, someone who gave love with depth, someone who loved themselves enough not to settle for scraps. Men don't regret losing someone they could take or leave. They regret losing the woman who made them feel seen without them having to ask. The one who added something rare to their life, a kind of warmth, patience, presence, and power they didn't even realize they needed until it was gone. The woman who knew how to challenge them in the right moments, who brought beauty into the boring, who knew her own value but still gave from the heart. That's not someone you move on from easily. That's someone who leaves a mark. You don't have to say a word to prove you were irreplaceable. You just live your life fully. You let yourself evolve, grow, and glow. You pour into your friendships, your passions, your goals. You stop checking for his validation and start investing in the things that make you feel alive again. Because when he sees you thriving without him, when he realizes your glow didn't fade after he walked away but only intensified, that's when it really sinks in. Men often realize the value of what they had when the silence hits and your presence is no longer an option. When they try to go out and find someone just like you and can't, they discover that the connection they once thought they could toss aside is suddenly a lot more rare than they assumed. He might distract himself with someone else, but he'll find she doesn't laugh quite the same way. She doesn't have the same emotional depth. She doesn't give that same feeling of home. That's the difference between someone who was just there and someone who mattered. Your power is not in convincing him to see your worth. It's in making your worth so undeniable that losing you becomes a lesson he carries forever. And this doesn't come from playing games or pretending not to care. It comes from actually caring more about yourself. It comes from healing, from choosing yourself every time, from deciding that you don't need to chase someone who can't recognize the gold right in front of them. The moment he realizes you're not watching him anymore, not responding to the breadcrumbs, not waiting for his bare minimum, he starts to reflect. And that reflection often hurts more than anything you could have said. Because while he expected you to hold on, to wait, to break, he underestimated your ability to rise. And nothing bruises a man's ego more than realizing the woman he thought would always be there no longer looks his way. This is how you crush his illusion. You don't need revenge. You don't need to force closure. You just keep being her. The woman who knows her own worth, who gives deeply but never begs, who brings peace and passion in the same breath, and who knows when it's time to walk away with her head held high. And when you do, you don't just leave a gap in his life, you leave a silence that echoes, a memory that lingers, a love that haunts, not because it was desperate, but because it was irreplaceable. The ultimate way to turn the tables isn't through rage or revenge, it's through the evolution he didn't see coming. When a woman transforms her pain into power, when she turns heartbreak into a higher standard, she becomes unforgettable. In a way no temporary thrill ever could. Because most people expect you to crumble when they break your heart. They expect you to drown in self-doubt, to lose yourself trying to understand why they left, or worse, trying to get them back. But the real shock comes when you don't just survive, you elevate. Growth is the one thing he never counted on. He thought he could leave you where he dropped you, but instead you built something stronger on top of what was shattered. You picked up the broken pieces of yourself and rearranged them into a version so whole, so radiant, that the old you would barely recognize her. And that's where his ego starts to burn, not because you changed, but because you changed without him, because you no longer need the validation he used to weaponize against you. And this kind of growth isn't loud, it doesn't scream through social media or cry for attention. It speaks quietly through your energy, your peace, your refusal to settle for crumbs ever again. It's in the way you set boundaries now without apology. It's in the way you no longer explain yourself to people who don't care to understand you. It's in the way you've become so full within yourself that the idea of someone else completing you no longer fits your life story. That transformation is what crushes him. Not the anger, not the silence, but the fact that you went and became everything he couldn't be for you. He sees now that what he mistook for weakness was actually depth. That your tears weren't drama, they were truth. That your effort wasn't neediness, it was loyalty. He starts to realize you were never too much. He was simply too little for the kind of love you brought. But here's the most powerful part. You don't evolve to prove him wrong. You evolve because it's what your soul demanded. You evolve because you finally looked in the mirror and remembered who you were before you handed him pieces of yourself in hopes he'd give you something whole. You evolved because staying stuck in pain would have meant letting him win twice. Once when he left, and again when you stopped living. And now that evolution becomes a mirror he has to look into. Every time he sees your name, your growth, your glow, it's a reminder of the version of you he lost and the woman he never deserved. He may pretend not to care. He might chase distractions. But deep down, he knows. He knows he had something rare, and he let it slip through his fingers because he wasn't ready to be the man who could hold it. So don't underestimate the power of your glow up. Because when you rise, when you walk differently, speak differently, choose differently, that's the real sting. That's the message no text can deliver. That's the silent scream that echoes louder than anything you could ever say. And that, more than anything, is what breaks the ego of the one who once broke your heart. When someone breaks your heart, the instinctive reaction is to plead, to ask why, to search for answers that might never come. That desire to be understood, to make sense of what just happened, is human. But if you really want to disarm the person who thought they had the power to destroy you, there's something far more effective than begging, crying, or showing them how broken you feel. It's silence. Pure, calm, deliberate silence. When you stop explaining yourself, when you resist the urge to convince them of your worth, when you no longer try to make them see what they lost, you immediately take back control. Silence does what words can't. It sends a message that says, I don't need to win you back. I need to win myself back. And in that space of not reacting, not reaching out, not explaining, you become a mystery that challenges the ego that once felt so confident in having access to you whenever it wanted. He was used to the emotional reactions. He counted on them, in fact. He may have mistaken your love and vulnerability as something he had full control over. So when you remove your energy, when you vanish from the emotional chess game, it shakes him. It disturbs the balance he relied on to feel important. Most people think silence is about absence, but real silence, the kind that gets into someone's head, is filled with presence. It's filled with self-worth, with quiet dignity, with the kind of strength that doesn't need an audience or applause. It's the silence that speaks, I've closed the door, not because I'm angry, but because I love myself enough to walk away from confusion and pain. And it's not just about silence toward him. It's also the silence of no longer over-explaining to others why things ended. The silence of no longer defending your choices. You stop talking about him to everyone because you realize your healing doesn't need to be loud to be valid. You understand that power isn't found in dragging someone's name through the dirt. It's found in elevating your own life so far above the drama that they no longer even appear in the storyline. See, that kind of silence is magnetic. He may not say it, but he notices. He notices that you're no longer reacting, no longer orbiting around his attention. He sees that your world didn't end when he walked out, it expanded. And that realization stings. Not because he wanted you to suffer, but because he didn't expect you to thrive. The truth is, when you stop explaining, you stop giving him a front row seat to your healing process. You close the curtain, you take the stage away, and suddenly he's left with only his thoughts. Thoughts that will eventually start whispering, "What if I was wrong?" And those thoughts will echo in his mind long after your silence begins, because people don't forget the one who responded to disrespect with grace. They don't forget the one who didn't grovel, who didn't try to prove anything, who just disappeared and got better. The next time you feel that urge to send one last text, to express one more emotion, to seek one final form of closure, pause. Ask yourself what you're trying to achieve. Is it peace? Or is it validation from someone who already showed you they don't value you the way you deserve? Because the moment you realize that you don't need a response to heal is the moment you win. Not by breaking him down with words, but by building yourself back up in quiet, unshakable strength. When someone breaks your heart, the instinctive reaction is often to reach out, to explain, to try to fix what feels broken between you. But what if the most powerful thing you could do isn't to speak, but to embrace silence? Silence, when used intentionally, holds a magnetic power that can shift the entire dynamic between you and the person who hurt you. It's not about playing games or being petty. It's about mastering yourself, your emotions and your reactions in a way that forces him to truly feel your absence. When you stop chasing, when you stop reacting, you create a vacuum in his world. That vacuum isn't empty. It's full of questions, regrets, and confusion. He's used to having your attention, your words, your energy. Suddenly, when you pull away and don't respond to his messages or calls, it unsettles him. It disrupts the pattern he was comfortable with. Your silence becomes a mirror that reflects back everything he took for granted, everything he dismissed, and everything he missed. This kind of silence is louder than words because it demands he confront what's gone. The truth is, silence shows strength. It demonstrates that you have self-control and self-respect. When you don't beg for explanations or validation, you communicate that your worth is not dependent on his recognition or approval. And that shift in energy, it's irresistible. Because what a man wants is to feel he's valued and desired, but not to the point where you lose yourself in the process. When you're silent and distant, you show him that you're not desperate. You show him that you have standards, boundaries, and a life beyond the relationship. This absence creates a new kind of tension, one that triggers his mind to obsess over what he lost. He starts replaying moments, wondering if he made a mistake and imagining how different things could have been if he hadn't pushed you away. The silence forces him to fill in the gaps with his own thoughts and emotions, which are often amplified by regret. Instead of you constantly trying to prove your value, you let him discover it on his own. And that discovery hits far deeper. What's also powerful about mastering your silence is that it puts you back in control. When you're constantly reacting to his behavior, you're handing him power over your emotional state. But when you stop responding, you reclaim that power. You choose when and how to engage, if at all. This not only protects your emotional well-being, but also shifts the dynamic. So he's the one reaching out, wondering how to get back into your good graces. It flips the narrative from you being the one who's hurt and chasing to you being the one who's composed and unshaken. The challenge is that silence isn't easy. It can feel lonely, especially when your heart is aching and your mind is racing with thoughts of him. But this is where your inner strength comes in, to resist the urge to fill the silence with desperate calls or messages, and instead to focus on yourself, to invest in your own healing, growth, and happiness, because the more you thrive without him, the more irresistible you become. It's not about punishing him, it's about elevating yourself to a place where you're whole and fulfilled, regardless of his presence. In that space, your silence isn't just absence, it's a powerful statement. It says you're not willing to settle for less than you deserve. It says you respect yourself too much to beg for a love that isn't freely given. And when he sees you like that, calm, confident, and distant, it creates a pull he can't resist. The irony is that the less you try to hold on, the more he feels the urge to hold on to you. Mastering your silence is a way of reclaiming your narrative. Instead of being a person who's broken by loss, you become someone who is unbreakable because of it. The more you step back and let your silence speak, the more you position yourself as the prize, the one he truly lost and can't replace. It's the ultimate comeback, not by chasing or pleading, but by simply being the woman who won't be shaken, who won't settle, and who holds her power in the quiet moments when words fail. This is how you make him fall into your absence, not by force, but by the undeniable strength of your silence. In the end, breaking his ego after he broke your heart isn't about revenge or bitterness. It's about reclaiming your power and dignity. It's about showing through your actions and your calm strength that you are far more than the pain he caused. When you stop reacting, stop chasing, and start valuing yourself above all else, you send a message louder than any words ever could that you are unbreakable, unshakable, and unstoppable. True power lies in your peace, in your ability to rise above, and in the confidence that no one's actions define your worth. That is the ultimate way to break him, not by tearing him down, but by building yourself higher than he ever imagined.